Hi, welcome to Microsoft Alumni All Access. It's a new virtual series by the Microsoft Alumni Network, where you can hear directly from Microsoft leaders about some of the company's biggest initiatives. I'm your host, Rich Kaplan. Alumni All Access will give you an exclusive inside look at why these initiatives matter to Microsoft's mission and how the global alumni community can get involved. How you can act with Microsoft and act with each other to make a difference. As alumni, we aspired to change the world, and now the world needs us to help more than ever. After the past few years with severe weather patterns, intense wildfires, even the most ardent deniers of climate change are coming to the conclusion that human actions are rapidly and dramatically impacting the world's natural systems. We're generating too much waste, polluting the land, the sea, and the air. Climate change is real, and it's impacting food, water, economies, and communities all around the world. The good news is Microsoft has an ambitious 10-year plan to do its part to stem climate change. It has pledged to be carbon negative, water positive, zero waste, and develop a planetary computing platform by 2030. 2030, that's 8 years. It's why I'm so pleased to welcome our guest, Microsoft's General Manager for Sustainability Solutions, Mark Kroese.
Hey, Rich, thanks. Great to be here.
Happy to
Familiar
have you
territory.
Here. Yes. We're going to discuss how together we can and must, hopefully, build a more sustainable world.
Yes, and I'm actually optimistic.
Good. Hey, well, 8 years. I said 8 years. 8 years. That's 8 years is a short. That's a big goal in a small window of time.
Yeah, it's actually a 30-year commitment because it goes out to 2050.
Okay.
But it's a big commitment. I think it's the boldest commitment Microsoft's ever made.
Well, you know what? We need it. It's awesome to hear. Yeah. So I understand your team oversees Microsoft's sustainability product strategy, our customer and partner engagements, and the $1 billion Climate Innovation Fund.
That's right. It's there's really two teams on sustainability at Microsoft. There's an operations team which is internally focusing on executing on the commitments, water positive, carbon negative, zero waste. And then there's an external team, my team, that focuses on market development as well as products for all our customers, because it occurs to us all of the stuff we're going through as a company to deliver on those commitments. Every corporate customer is going through the same journey.
I certainly hope so. So, and you have a $1 billion fund. Can you tell me what that $1 billion fund is?
Yeah, so we talk about three challenges, what we call the 3 M's: the meaning of net zero, the measurement of net zero, and the markets of net zero. And the $1 billion fund is to increase and accelerate, it's two verbs, accelerate and innovate in markets. So we're investing in climate tech. And one example is carbon removal technology. So last year, Microsoft was about 0.03% of global emissions. But we bought half.
That's a small number.
Yeah, it's a small number. It's about 20 million over 51 billion. But we bought half the available carbon removal supply in the world.
Wow.
So we do not have a functioning market.
Yeah.
And so it's really in our interest to invest in companies like Climeworks in Zurich, Switzerland, that are doing direct air capture, or forest-based projects that are doing natural ways of trees, soil, biochar, that kind of thing, because we just need more carbon removal.
It's amazing our role. You wouldn't think of Microsoft in this role. Our role in sustainability and creation of a marketplace to help companies do it successfully.
That's right. And what's really exciting is, okay, our $1 billion, you think that's a lot of money. And it is a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
I mean, we're investing it over, it's great. We're investing it in 4 years, not a typical 7-year VC cycle.
Yeah.
We have one LP, her name's Amy Hood.
Yeah. That's a big LP.
Or it's Treasury, Microsoft Treasury. We do no fundraising. Right, and we get to really focus on climate impact. And we're not focused on outsized market returns. We're focused on climate impact as our key metric for success. But when you also look at it, there's probably $1 trillion of investment capital around the world chasing climate tech. So we get to take all of our learnings from this $1 billion and influence other funds. So the U.S. government calls us. I was on a call with, I've been on a call with lots of funds recently where they're like, tell us your investment thesis. And we're happy to share.
That's great.
Because we're not trying to,
you're not competing to.
We're not competing to make a better return or anything. We just want everyone to get on board and invest in the right things.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you've been at Microsoft 22 years.
Yep.
Tell me, and you're a rebounder. You left and you came back.
Yep.
Tell me sort of your career journey at Microsoft.
Yeah. So I was most recently at Microsoft in 2012, and I really wanted to. I've been a passionate mountaineer and climber my whole life, and in my short lifetime of say 30 years of going into the mountains, I've seen massive glacial recession. I've seen so much change into the landscapes that I find so beautiful and important in the world. I've been on trips to places like Madagascar, which is 83% deforested, devastating loss of not just deforestation, but biodiversity loss and stuff. So, at some point we all have this moment that speaks to you. It's different for everybody, but for me, it was watching a place I'd been that had a lake that was half a mile that wasn't there 20 years ago because the glacier receded. And I'm like, we got to do something here. So I just wanted to get involved.
That's awesome. It seems like that's an area where your past experience at Microsoft in terms of technology and your passion for that and your passion for the environment came together.
That's right. That's right. And then in terms of coming back to Microsoft, one of the things you realize is about climate change is it's the ultimate commons problem. And it is a problem where the pie chart of solutions has lots of teeny little slices. And you really need to do things at scale. Like it's the scale that matters. And, I spent a year in 2016 as a Harvard fellow focused on this stuff. And I really wrapped my head around it. And I'm like, me investing $50K here or some money in angel investing in, that's not going to move the needle. So
you have to do things at scale, at big scale, right?
Big scale. And you have to really think globally. You have to think about how are you going to influence China and India and, so a lot of moving parts.
So tell me about how both you and Microsoft sort of plays this critical role on the world's journey to net zero. I mean, you said Microsoft's a small player influencing others, but what exactly do we tell people who come and ask us about climate change and what we're going to do and how they apply it to their company?
Yeah, I spend, as you can imagine, a lot of time in the Executive Briefing Center. All of our our S500 companies, they all have this as top of mind. Like, tell us how to. And 2 years ago, the conversation was not. It was more about like if we should set a net zero commitment and what it should be. Now the world is in execution mode. It's how. How do we do this? And one of the big parts of that is carbon accounting.
Yeah.
Like the world's carbon ledger does not add up. Like what the atmosphere says and what all the emissions reporting says, they don't add up.
Yeah.
So you can't measure what you can't manage. So Microsoft has a role to play in the cloud. Like carbon accounting is a digitally based thing that has to be done not just or the biggest competition in carbon accounting is this product called Excel, which everyone's doing these, and that's what Microsoft sort of hacked the solution on. But
well, Excel allows you to do many. Didn't you used to work on Excel?
Yeah. But we need a proper cloud for sustainability, right? So we're working on that. It'll be generally available June 1st, and it is a tool that will help the world with Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 carbon accounting so that they can set targets. We call it the 5 R's journey: record, report, reduce, remove, and replace.
Awesome.
And every customer is going through that.
Awesome. Hey, speaking of which, I want to remind people that we're taking questions. So you can submit your questions at any time, and near the end of the broadcast, we'll get to them. So sustainability is not just a buzzword for Microsoft, but I know some people question why a tech company, right, is so focused on sustainability. So you told us the small percentage, but tell us about Microsoft's global footprint today and why it matters.
Well, Microsoft's emissions are, again, 0.03%, but they're bigger than they've ever been. And a lot of that is data centers, right? Data centers, Xbox, because we take responsibility for all the electricity and all the,
Right, we're a hardware manufacturer.
Right.
We're a data center. We have how many employees?
50, 60, 70,000.
160,000 employees in buildings globally, right? So those are the concrete,
steel, the campus that we're building up there, lots of embodied carbon. So, I am so thankful that Satya, Brad Smith, Amy Hood, they were just willing to get behind this. They wanted to get behind this.
That's awesome.
From the top. Like, it is a core value. And you have this belief, you have to say, well, hey, companies that can do more should do more. And we obviously can do more, so we should do more. That's the idealistic part. There's also a pragmatic part. If Microsoft wants to continue to do well in the world, we're in every major economy in the world around us needs to do well.
Right.
And if natural disasters are, we have to have the world around us do well, and we have to bring the world with us.
I agree with you. Not everybody might know this, but Microsoft started its sustainability journey more than a decade ago. Even though we're live here talking about it today, but I'm not sure everybody knows all the innovative things that Microsoft is doing on the front. Can you share some of those ideas? And by the way, I brought with me on my Surface, of course, the 2021 sustainability, and I don't know, you could tell people where
it just retracted, but it's a PDF. You can go to Microsoft.com, wax sustainability.
Here it is.
Download it. It's 115 pages long.
Don't print it, right?
Yeah, don't print it. Yeah. but do read it. But it is we struggle with the size, but people want full transparency, and every appendix, everything's in there.
Right. Yeah, and it talks about carbon, water, waste, ecosystems, and the commitments we've made and the progress we've made against them.
That's right. And our carbon negative commitment, just to appreciate it, it is the boldest commitment in the history of industry. It is unbelievable because you think about right now we have about, let's call it 20 million metric tons of emissions. If that's going to go to zero in 8 years, there's two verbs, reduce and remove.
Two of the R's, yeah.
Yep. So reduce from and most of companies' emissions are what are called scope 3 emissions, which are from your up and downstream supply chain. So we're going to reduce 55%. And then we're going to durably remove the rest. Now, carbon removal is not carbon offsetting. Carbon offsetting is an avoided emission thing.
Right.
Where
you buy credits, right?
Yeah, you're paying somebody else to not do something.
Yeah.
Carbon removal is when you actually are removing permanently and durably carbon from the air, like a net new tree or a carbon capture fan that sucks it out of the air and stuffs it underground. So that's a big commitment. And then we're going to go back.
Are we planting trees?
We're doing everything. Like we have an all of the above strategy on carbon removal just because the supply problem is so tough. But then between 2030 and 2050, Microsoft's going to go back and sweep up all of the historical emissions from 1975 forward. So from an atmospheric perspective, by 2050, it will be as if Microsoft never existed. Wow.
That makes me proud.
Yeah.
What are you most proud of?
I think I'm most proud of the carbon negative commitment. I'm also proud of the work. I'm proud of the fact that there are now like 400 people at Microsoft with sustainability in their title, and how Satya, Brad, Amy, the whole SLT is totally behind this. And they are driving the company to not just do well, but to do good. And it feels really good. So we're not tin cupping our way through this exercise. It is straight from the top. So it always helps when you can start sentences with, Satya said, that helps. but it shouldn't even have to say that. Every employee in the company is proud. And the younger our workforce is, the prouder they are.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to work for a company that is ethical.
That's right.
That is sustainable, that has an opinion on things that matter to the world. And Microsoft certainly does have that. It's inspiring that the leadership has taken this position in the community. When you could say they didn't need to, but they must do it. Still, climate change is an overwhelming issue. Microsoft is just one company. Tell me how it's using its role in the global community to have an influence beyond our own energy and water use. You started that conversation, but give us a little more detail.
Yeah, so we sort of have 4 aspects to the way we operate. We have the operations team, which is working across the company to do everything. We have a product team that is working to commercialize those products for our commercial customers. We have a whole partner motion, which is about getting in partnerships with all the right companies, whether it's big oil companies or any other kind of companies, and our Climate Innovation Fund partners with a lot of companies. And then we have a policy voice. And that's really where, Brad Smith wrote this book, Tools and Weapons, and we are influencing policy around the world. We have a seat at COP26. We have a voice in Washington, D.C. And, it's just kind of this new era where big companies are acting as governments, right?
That's amazing.
The book Tools and Weapons is saying we need to be more regulated. We need to take care of ourselves. We need to regulate ourselves, right? So when the SEC comes to us and says, do you want us, when we can lobby to them and say, we think all public companies should be required to disclose emissions as just one example of a policy thing, they listen to us.
That's awesome. No, that is really awesome. Hey, you and I were talking before. Tell me how the war in Ukraine is impacting sustainability.
It's obviously a horrible, horrible thing.
Yeah.
I think from a sustainability perspective, we will look back at this moment as yet another inflection point in the drive for, European, energy independence, but also sustainable energy independence. I was just at a climate conference in Austria, and this is the topic was unifying the EU's energy transition. People talk about the energy transition to renewables. And so whether it's wind and solar, nuclear, even new age nuclear, it's all about getting ourselves to a massive increase in renewable. Like Microsoft has a pledge that by 2025, 100% of our energy consumption, which is mostly data centers, will be renewable.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. It's great to see this kind of leadership. I did a podcast last year with Orlando Ayala, and he serves on several boards when he left Microsoft. One of those was Ecopetrol, which is responsible for 60% of production of oil and gas in Colombia. And it's funny, I thought, now why would Orlando get on an oil and gas company board? It didn't make any sense to me. And he said, no.
Yeah.
He said, I want to tackle a very hard problem at a very large scale from the inside. And he was talking about sustainability. And I thought it was just awesome that he was doing that. I know you see a bigger opportunity to tackle what you're calling this planet-sized challenge by getting other individuals and companies involved. Tell us more about what you're doing to expand the community of people focused on it.
Well, we are making ourselves available to anyone who will listen. With all of Microsoft's sales motion. So sustainability in fiscal year 23, which starts in July, is really going to become a proper, righteous customer solution area.
Great.
So it
Awesome.
went from the kind of this fringe thing to it is now part of like a thing in every salesperson's briefcase, so to speak, right? And they're trained on it and they know how to sell it or to deploy it or share it, right? And then, we're out in the world talking on committees and conferences and whatever. And then we have an employee engagement program now. We just hired our first employee engagement person.
Oh, cool.
Who is focused on employee programs, because every employee says, well, that's great, but what can I do, right?
Yes.
What can I at the individual level do? And there's a lot people can do.
Awesome. Why don't we, let's take a few audience questions. Have we gotten some audience questions? I'm getting the nod. Yes, we are. Tell us what your team looks like and how Microsoft is, you said there was a big team, how Microsoft is investing in people resources to do this work. What makes up a sustainability team at Microsoft?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think there's about 400 people at Microsoft. The centralized SELA working for Brad Smith team is about 50 people. And that is half operations, kind of half internally focused, half externally focused. There's 4 teams: operations, solutions, policy, and science.
Yeah.
With the operations and solutions teams being the biggest. And then there are, hundreds of people fanned across Azure, M365, Surface, Xbox, real estate facilities that are directly involved with sustainability. So it's really inculcated into everything Microsoft is doing.
That's awesome. You said something that made me think, if I'm just an individual, not a business owner, what can I do personally? What does it mean to you? Not leading a fund, not being involved in something big. What should people do personally?
Well, one thing you should do is read Bill Gates' new book, How to Avert a Climate Disaster, because it tells you a lot of things you can do. One of the things he says in there is like eat less meat, because the climate impacts of meat and agriculture and all that are drive electric vehicles.
Right.
Just consume less.
Right. Right.
We're not drinking out of plastic bottles here, isn't that great? But
wait, we're drinking out of Microsoft Alumni Network.
Yes, there's
just a little pitch right there.
and one of the things that people, storage in the cloud isn't free. A year's worth, on average, for the average productive person, Westerner, a year's worth of accumulated email and video on servers is the same as a trip to Seattle, New York, and back by airplane. So delete stuff.
Wow. Never even thought about that.
Delete.
Does Microsoft have a deletion strategy for things on digital drives that will reduce our amount of carbon? And
we don't have a published policy yet, but my thing is, if you're the last person to watch the Teams meeting recording, delete it. And you got to be careful here, because we do have document retention policies and all that. But at some point, that's going to come together into a kind of a sensible behavioral model. As the CEO of my home life, I delete stuff, because I don't have a document retention policy at home.
No, it's a good perspective, though. I hadn't really thought about spinning drives with data on them that needs to keep spinning, just takes energy, even if they're not accessed.
That's right. A huge part of Microsoft's emissions are obviously from data centers or energy consumption, and a huge part of that is from servers at rest. So there are a lot of science problems that we're trying to,
Wow. You're right. When I want to look something up in the cloud, I type it in, there it is.
It's instant, right. So that 5 nines of reliability is kind of at odds with a sleepy drive that'll wake up and give you that answer in 2 minutes.
Wow.
Yep.
So a Microsoft alum said they're joining a climate tech company. What is Microsoft doing to help companies be compliant with ESG accounting?
Right. So we are building a bunch of ESG reporting capabilities into the cloud for sustainability.
Sorry, and what is ESG?
Environmental, social, governance.
Got it.
So Microsoft is not set up. We don't have a VP of ESG. We have an E group, a bunch of S groups, and a bunch of G groups. But collectively, we have ESG, a great ESG score, right?
Yeah.
The Cloud for Sustainability, E is kind of the majority shareholder in the ESG world. So E is a logical place, the Cloud for Sustainability, to aggregate and bring all that stuff together so that a person in a corporation can evaluate their ESG score.
Cool. All right. Someone else asked, they said, you mentioned the SEC. What do you think about the new SEC proposal to standardize climate-related disclosures for investors?
We think it's great. And Microsoft has been a passionate advocate to make that happen. So we think it should be mandatory. We think it should be more transparent, more open. And of course, we've got 115 pages that we're willing to share. And we'd like everyone to be that open.
Okay, here's maybe a controversial question, maybe not. Can you share your point of view on cryptocurrency and its impact on the environment?
Yeah, so this is in the news a lot lately, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to distinguish between two things. There's blockchain, and then there's crypto as the most energy-consuming blockchain application. I think it's bad. I
figured you were going to say that.
Yeah. But I don't think, let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. Not all blockchain is bad.
Right.
There are plenty of blockchain that are just applications. Blockchain is brilliant. Crypto is crazy consuming, right? So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But on the surface, it doesn't feel so good.
Right. It's just burning cycles, burning energy.
Yeah.
We have alumni around the world. What can alumni in Europe do to sort of be part of all of these efforts? Is there anything specific for people in Europe?
Yeah, that is a good question. I mean, I think the individual actions are kind of global.
Yeah.
I will say that so many of the best practices come from Europe.
Yeah.
In this job, I am on a call at 7 a.m. with Europe, right? Many mornings a week, just because that's where so much innovation and energy is coming from, and great policy. But I don't think an individual in Europe and an individual anywhere else is materially different.
Okay. To what degree, someone asked, to what degree will Microsoft's goals for sustainability affect its vendor partners or vendor choices in the future?
Significantly. So again, over 80% of our emissions are what are called Scope 3 emissions, which are up and down the supply chain. Mm-hmm. So we have a supplier code of conduct today that says to be a Microsoft vendor, you've got to do these things. Well, increasingly, those supplier code of conduct will include more and more rigorous compliance with sustainability things, from reporting to just actual emissions.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
to your point, it's the whole supply chain end to end. You can't just say Microsoft. It's the complete supply chain.
That's right. Like, one of the things that's going to be really interesting to watch is semiconductors. Like, oh my gosh, semiconductors are so carbon intensive. Mm-hmm. We buy a lot of them, mm-hmm. and we're having conversations with those people. Mm-hmm. Those aren't problems you solve in a week,
right,
or even a year.
Right. Someone else asked, does Microsoft see a business opportunity in helping companies figure out and track their Scope 1, 2, 3 carbon emissions?
We do. Well, let's say we see an opportunity, and we're not really focused on it necessarily as a big business opportunity. Yeah. But the Cloud for Sustainability, which was announced a little less than a year ago and will be generally available in June, is our carbon emissions accounting tool to track Scope 1, 2, and 3 carbon emissions. That's exactly what it's designed for. It is priced in a very egalitarian way. So we want it to be something that all companies can afford and use.
Okay, awesome. Mark, thank you.
Thank you.
The Microsoft alumni community is full of decision makers who have influence in their companies, organizations, and communities. Plenty are now innovating in the green tech space, and others are focusing their post-Microsoft time in environmental advocacy. If the key to climate action is collective action, what can we all do along with Microsoft to have an even greater impact?
Is this where I'm supposed to say employee engagement is huge too?
Sure, yes.
Sorry, I thought that was the close and I was supposed to be done here. Again, it comes down to, excuse me, picking a set of behaviors that are sustainable for your own life, mm-hmm. and trying to influence as many people to do that as you can.
Yep.
And that's really, Microsoft's 0.03% of emissions are important because we have a sterling story to tell, but it's really leveraged when you document it and you do it, and everyone. So sharing anything you're doing as a best practice, I think, is a good way to go.
Awesome. Mark, thank you for spending time with us today and giving Microsoft Alumni and All Access a view of everything Microsoft's doing in sustainability.
Great. It's great to be with you all. Thank you.
And thank you to the audience for joining us on our first Microsoft All Access. You can find more resources on Microsoft's 2021 Sustainability Report on the Microsoft Alumni Network's Climate Action Resource page. You can also go to Microsoft.com/sustainability. And we're going to put a QR code up on MicrosoftAlumni.com that'll take you direct there. Mark, thanks a bunch.
Thanks.